Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Moscow viewed Ukraine's recent strikes on the Bryansk border region using US-made ATACMS missiles as a sign of Western intent to escalate the conflict. Speaking at a press conference on the sidelines of the G20 Summit in Rio de Janeiro, Lavrov noted that the attacks carried out overnight could not have occurred without American involvement. He pointed to repeated warnings by Russian President Vladimir Putin about the implications of granting Ukraine long-range missile capabilities.
The fact that ATACMS was used repeatedly tonight in the Bryansk region indicates their desire for escalation. It is impossible to use these high-tech missiles without the Americans. Putin has said this repeatedly. He warned about how our position would change if this long-range capability that they're now talking about, up to 300 kilometers, was approved. In fact, this is not an approval for Ukraine to use long-range missiles. It is simply an announcement that they will now hit up to 300 kilometers.
Lavrov highlighted that Western nations should closely examine Russia's updated nuclear doctrine, which has been revised to address perceived threats. The policy, approved by Putin this week, stipulates that attacks by non-nuclear states supported by nuclear powers would be treated as joint aggression against Russia.
Today we have officially published the basics of the nuclear doctrine. Everything has been confirmed there, and what the president has been voicing publicly for a month or so has now been enshrined by law. I hope that they will read this doctrine not the way they read the UN Charter, seeing only what they need, but they will read the doctrine in its entirety and interconnectedness.
The Russian Defense Ministry confirmed strikes involving 6 ATACMS missiles in Bryansk, stating that 5 were intercepted by air defenses while 1 sustained damage. Kyiv has not commented on the incident. Reports from US media earlier in the week suggested that President Joe Biden had lifted restrictions on Ukraine's use of long-range systems inside Russian territory. Meanwhile, Lavrov also commended German Chancellor Olaf Scholz for resisting internal pressure to provide Ukraine with long-range Taurus missiles, describing the decision as a responsible stance. The German leader has argued that supplying such weaponry would exacerbate the conflict, despite criticism from opposition factions in Berlin. Lavrov contrasted Scholz's approach with what he called the West's broader push for escalation through advanced arms supplies to Kyiv.
Look, we all observe the same facts and analyze them, whether as diplomats or journalists. As you rightly pointed out, Scholz has a principled stance, despite criticism from the Greens and Merz of the CDU, who are demanding that he grant this permission anyway. However, I believe Scholz's position is a responsible one.
The G20 Summit, held in Rio de Janeiro from November 18th to 19, focused on a range of global challenges, including economic recovery and climate issues. Lavrov stated that efforts by Western nations to dominate the agenda with discussions about Ukraine had failed, with Global South nations pushing for broader conflict resolution mechanisms. A final declaration signed by the leaders included a provision on Ukraine, which Lavrov described as advocating for a realistic path to peace.